Hey everyone, it's Yenn Purkis here. I'm presenting via video as part of Trevor Clark's presentation about twice exceptional and autistic people and passionate interests. So I'm going to say a little personal story about this stuff. When I went to school, I was one of those gifted children. I was academically brilliant. I never studied. I have a master's degree and I've never studied for an exam in my life. I was hyperlexic as a kid, so I read at a much older age group all the way through, and I was a very gifted writer and artist, all of which were lovely things. Sadly, the other side of school, the people side of school, was not very supportive for me. I was actually bullied really badly the whole way through high school and some of primary, and that was really awful and made school quite hellish. I didn't get any support during my school journey around the bullying or anything like that. Pretty much I was left to my own devices, and I think part of that was because I was very talented and very gifted, and teachers thought because I was doing so well academically, everything else must be okay. But it really wasn't. By the age of 14, I had what I would say was probably a diagnosable anxiety disorder, which was not picked up. I struggled to know what was happening, but I do know now that I was very anxious most of the time. And my academic prowess was a great thing. So despite the fact it meant that I got missed in terms of my needs, it also gave me a sense of pride in who I was and was a big positive, and it was the only positive thing I had at school. My passions, so my own passionate interests in primary school, were used to deliver the curriculum. So I was passionate about Doctor Who and about cats, and so I got to write stories about time travel, and I got to illustrate books with like different pictures of all the different kinds of cats there are. So that was wonderful, and to my mind that's best practice at school in utilising an autistic kid's passions and interests as a way of teaching the curriculum. In high school, my passions were very different and they were quite dark. I was interested in the Cold War and communism and spies and all that kind of thing, which were quite dark interests. And the end of the world, I'd write stories about nuclear war and stuff. It was very dark. And nobody picked up on that either. And I do tend to think with autistic people, if their passions are quite dark and scary, it's often an indication that their mind's quite dark and scary and they're having a really hard time. And I know in high school I was having a really hard time with that. So enough about me, let's talk about other autistic students. Don't assume that academic prowess means a kid is doing okay. For many of us, the academic stuff is not difficult. So even though other people would consider getting straight A's and coming top of the school a really difficult and impressive feat, for me and for other autistic kids who are gifted and twice exceptional, those things are not difficult. That's not the skills that are challenging. So what that means is that people do tend to overlook the fact that someone's having a hard time because, well, wow, they're doing so well academically. Our passionate interest is usually our favourite thing, so engaging us in teaching using that passion is a really good idea. It's great for that passion to be a part of the curriculum and where possible to adapt that for using and teaching the kids. Recognise and acknowledge the talents, which is really important, but also see beyond that to difficulties that student might be having. Some warning signs that a student is having trouble include perfectionism and paralysis and being unable to do anything in case you get it wrong. Changes in mood and behaviour, particularly sort of dramatic ones over a short period of time. The kid being bullied. Now, up to 80% of autistic kids, studies have shown, experience bullying at school. Now, that's not good enough. That is not okay. But it does happen a lot, so being aware if bullying is happening. Changes in activities and interests, so especially if we go from liking something innocuous to liking something really dark. Being more worried about making mistakes. Now, often we're worried about making mistakes anyway, but being increasingly worried. More meltdowns, shutdowns, burnout, things like that. Those things are an indication often of how an autistic person is travelling. And if life is overwhelming and difficult, you're more likely to have more of those things. Of course, meltdowns and shutdowns are not deliberate and they're not poor behaviour. They're a response to overload. So that's also really important to know. Educators, clinicians and parents can work with the child using their passions and interests to support learning and development, and that's a really important takeaway from what I'm saying. An autistic person's passion is usually the best thing in their life. It's usually the one of the most enjoyable things that we can do as autistic people. So using those passions in education is so important. So thank you for watching this, and I'll hand back to Trevor.